Nobody noticed the exact moment he disappeared. There was no goodbye post. No dramatic message. No explanation. One day he just stopped showing up. He stopped answering calls. Stopped replying to messages. Stopped explaining why his life looked the way it did. People assumed the obvious things. He failed. He couldn't handle it. He gave up. And honestly, for a while, even he wondered if they were right. 5 years earlier, his life looked normal on the outside. A job that paid the bills. Friends he saw on weekends. Conversations filled with plans that never turned into action. He was busy but not moving. Surrounded, but alone. Alive, but not respected. Every day felt like a quiet negotiation with disappointment. He woke up tired not because he worked too hard but because nothing he did mattered. His effort went unnoticed. His ideas were ignored. His patience was taken for granted. He was the reliable one. The understanding one. The one who always waited his turn. And his turn never came. The breaking point wasn't loud. There was no single failure, no explosive argument, no dramatic loss. It was a simple moment, almost invisible. Late one night, sitting on the edge of his bed, scrolling through his phone, he realized something terrifying. Everyone else was moving forward. And he was standing still, hoping someone would notice. That's when the thought appeared, quiet but sharp. What if the problem isn't bad luck? But me? Not his intelligence. Not his potential. But his need to be seen, approved, and accepted. He had built his entire life around being available. Around being liked. Around being easy to deal with. And in doing so, he had made himself invisible. The next morning, he didn't wake up motivated. He woke up empty. And that emptiness made one thing clear. If he stayed where he was, nothing would change. So he made a decision that scared him more than failure. He chose silence. He didn't announce it. He didn't plan it perfectly. He simply stopped feeding the world access to him. No more updates. No more explanations. No more performing productivity. He reduced his life to the essentials. Work, learning, training, sleep. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Almost painful. Without constant feedback, he was forced to hear his own thoughts. The doubts he had been avoiding came back louder than ever. You're falling behind. You should reach out. People will forget you. And they did. Messages slowed down. Invitations stopped coming. His name faded from conversations. But something strange happened in the absence of noise. He started to see clearly. He realized how much of his energy had been spent maintaining an image instead of building a foundation. How much time he wasted explaining himself to people who weren't listening. So he began rebuilding, from zero. He studied when no one was watching. He worked after long days when quitting felt reasonable. He trained his body not for appearance but for discipline. Progress was slow. Painfully slow. There were months where nothing seemed to change. No validation. No proof he was on the right path. Only repetition. Only boredom. Only doubt. But unlike before, he didn't quit. Because quitting would mean returning to a life where he waited to be chosen. And he was done waiting. Over time, something shifted inside him. He stopped needing motivation. Stopped needing encouragement. Stopped needing permission. His confidence no longer came from results. It came from consistency. And consistency changes a man quietly. By the end of the first year, no one noticed a difference. By the second year, people assumed he had disappeared for good. By the third year, he barely recognized the person he used to be. He was sharper, calmer, more dangerous in a way that doesn't make noise. He no longer reacted to everything. No longer chased conversations. No longer tried to be understood. He was building something invisible, but solid. Something that didn't require applause. And somewhere deep down he knew. If he ever returned, it wouldn't be to explain himself. It would be to prove nothing, and let everything speak for itself. He didn't plan a comeback. There was no announcement. No, I'm back moment. No reveal. He simply reappeared. Not everywhere. Not loudly. Just enough to be noticed. And that's when the confusion started. People expected the old version of him. The polite one, the eager one, the man who explained himself too much and asked for too little. Instead they met silence. He spoke less. Listened more. And when he did speak, his words carried weight. It unsettled people. Some tried to reconnect casually, pretending the years hadn't passed. So, what have you been up to? They asked, smiling. He didn't give them a story. Working, he said. Nothing more. They laughed awkwardly, waiting for details that never came. Others were more direct. Why did you disappear? Where were you all this time? What happened to you? He didn't correct their assumptions. didn't defend himself, didn't fill the silence. He had learned something during those 5 years. People don't need explanations. They need outcomes. And outcomes take time to reveal themselves. The first signs showed up quietly. He declined things he would have accepted without hesitation before. He walked away from conversations that went nowhere. He said no without softening it. That alone changed the dynamic. People started watching him more closely. Some admired it. Most resented it. They called him distant, cold, arrogant. They said he had changed. They were right. But change threatens people who depend on your predictability. The old version of him had been useful, agreeable, easy to control. The new version wasn't. And systems don't like that. At work, he stopped overperforming for recognition. He focused on leverage, on results that mattered, on skills that couldn't be ignored. He stopped being everywhere, stopped responding instantly, stopped competing for attention, and slowly power shifted. Not because he demanded it, but because he no longer chased it. People noticed his absence more than his presence. That's when opportunities started appearing, not as favors but as questions. Would you consider? What do you think about? Could you handle? He didn't rush to answer. He evaluated. For the first time in his life he was choosing, not being chosen. But the return wasn't smooth. There was resistance. One person from his past tried to remind him of who he used to be. You're acting different, they said. You used to be more humble. He smiled politely. What they meant was, you used to accept less. Another tried guilt. People feel like you don't care anymore. You care. Just not at the cost of himself. The hardest moment came when someone he once supported turned against him. Not emotionally, strategically. They questioned his intentions, planted doubt, subtly tried to undermine his credibility. Old him would have panicked, would have explained, would have tried to fix the perception. New him stayed still. He had learned the most painful lesson during his disappearance. You cannot control how people interpret your growth, especially when it exposes their stagnation. He focused forward. He invested where others hesitated, learned what others avoided, built when others complained. There were setbacks, losses, moments where the silence felt heavy again. But this time he trusted the process, because he had already survived invisibility. What scared him before no longer had power. By the 4th year, the results became harder to ignore. Not dramatic, not viral, but undeniable. He spoke less in rooms and people listened more. He made fewer promises and delivered more. He didn't compete and still won. The people who once overlooked him now spoke his name carefully. Some tried to reconnect opportunistically. Others pretended they always believed in him. He didn't correct them. He didn't need to. The transformation wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about becoming someone who no longer needed approval to move forward. By the end of the 5th year, he understood something most people never do. Disappearing didn't make him successful. It removed the distractions that kept him average. And when he finally stood fully visible again, it wasn't to impress. It was to operate. Quietly. Precisely. On his terms. The comparison started quietly. At first it was subtle glances, short pauses in conversations, questions that sounded casual but weren't. How did you manage to change so much? What are you doing differently? When did this happen? He recognized that tone. It wasn't curiosity. It was discomfort. People weren't inspired by his transformation. They were threatened by it. Because his existence became a mirror, and not everyone liked what they saw reflected back. Some tried to minimize his progress. You just got lucky. You were always like this. It's not that impressive. Others tried to pull him back emotionally. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. You used to be more fun. They were right. He wasn't the same. And that was the point. What most people didn't understand was this. He didn't disappear to become better than them. He disappeared to become honest with himself. The 5 years of silence weren't productive because of discipline alone. They worked because they stripped his life down to truth. No audience. No applause. No shortcuts. Just results earned in isolation. And isolation changes a man in ways success never can. He learned to trust his own judgment. To sit with uncertainty without panic. To make decisions without needing reassurance. That made him calm. And calmness unsettles people who live in constant noise. The more grounded he became, the less he reacted. The less he reacted, the more power he had. Not over others, over himself. And self-control is the rarest form of control. There was a moment that confirmed everything. A meeting. A room full of people who once overlooked him. The conversation drifted. Opinions were thrown around. Strategies debated. Voices overlapped. He stayed quiet. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he didn't need to prove presence. When he finally spoke, the room stopped. Not dramatically. Naturally. He outlined a clear solution. No emotion. No exaggeration. Just precision. The decision was made minutes later. As people stood up, someone approached him quietly and said, "You've changed. You're different now." He nodded. He didn't explain what it cost. He didn't explain the nights of doubt, the loneliness, the years without validation. Because real transformation doesn't ask to be understood. It stands. After that, his life simplified even more. Fewer people. Fewer conversations. Fewer distractions. But everything left was aligned. He didn't chase growth anymore, it followed structure. He didn't seek confidence, it came from repetition. He didn't fear being forgotten, he had already survived it. That was his real advantage. Most people cling to visibility because they fear disappearing. He had already disappeared, and returned intact. Stronger. What surprised him most wasn't the success. It was how little it mattered. Money removed pressure, not emptiness. Status brought access, not meaning. What mattered was something quieter. He respected himself. He trusted his decisions. He didn't betray his standards for comfort. And once you have that, no external validation can compete. People still asked him about those 5 years. Why didn't you tell anyone? Why did you do it alone? Was it worth it? He never gave a direct answer. Because the truth wasn't motivational. The truth was uncomfortable. He disappeared because staying visible was killing him. Because being liked was costing him his future. Because no one was coming to rescue him. And because sometimes, the only way forward is to step away from everything familiar. He didn't hate the world he left behind. He just outgrew it. And growth doesn't announce itself. It moves silently, until it can no longer be ignored. He never returned to who he was. Not because he was ashamed of that man, but because that man did his job. He survived long enough for a stronger version to take his place. And once that happens, there's no reason to go back.